In this video, I'm sharing how to hand sew shirt buttonholes. Not that holding this up is doing any help. As far as I know, mine are the best in London. They can be good for anything you happen to want to do, like they could be good for blouses as well as shirts, or you could replace the machine buttonholes in your current shirts, or even just convert the type of cuff on your shirts. Shirt buttonholes can also be very easy for using to practice regular buttonholes, since they require a lot less specific things. I may be sounding self-aggrandizing until I say that I'm probably one of very few shirt buttonholes in London. Almost nobody in London does hand-sewn buttonholes on their shirts. I found myself in quite a unique position to take a, well, I wouldn't say valuable job, but it was a commission that others, even though maybe they could do it, they really didn't want to, and I happened to be better, so I, well, got the job. I have sewn in excess of 200 shirt buttonholes, and that's on top of the approaching 300 regular and not so regular buttonholes that I had already sewn. I did a fair amount of experimentation. My shirt buttonholes went through a certain evolution of trying many different things from my original shirt video, which is why I want to make this one. I have made myself something of an authority on the matter, so if anybody feels like challenging me on my method, please do. I've had absolutely no tutelage on the matter and would really like somebody else's input. And any other ideas that could or should be done that maybe I haven't thought of yet. Bear with. In my experimentation, I've tried to simplify the preparation of buttonholes as much as possible, given the number of buttonholes in a single shirt. If you're familiar with normal buttonholes, basically we don't do any of that, or at least I don't do any of that. For the thread, I've found about the length of my arm and about half my chest is enough, and using it on the double, just regular sewing thread on the double. Silk thread I've found is far too thick, and, well, a single piece of regular thread, that's far too thin. I tend to create basically a skein of the correct length, so I'm not constantly measuring out 70 to 80 centimeters of thread. Shirt buttonholes are generally 15 millimeters tall or a small 5/8. Cutting the hole open, and that's the hole prepared. I have a fine needle threaded, so I tie the ends into a knot, giving me about 35 to 40 centimeters of length. I start from the reverse of the cloth, at the bottom side of the hole, but the top and bottom should basically end up practically the same. From a couple of centimeters away, make a prick stitch towards the bottom of the hole without sewing through the other side of the cloth so that the thread is hidden between the layers. I make one prick and the needle should come out level with the bottom of the hole on the right hand side, about the width that the buttonhole stitches are going to be. Turning the cloth, I am making a tack on the other side of the hole, again about the width that the stitches will be. I come out of the fabric at the very base of the hole. This tack is through both layers of the cloth. Pulling that through, send the needle through the hole and pull it taut. From here, we start the buttonhole stitches. If you're familiar, it's the same but more narrow. If not, send the needle through the hole, and I'm poking the needle through the cloth quite closely to the raw edge of the hole. Leaving the needle half protruding, I'm taking the thread from the eye of the needle and wrapping that over the needle clockwise. I tried counterclockwise, it does not work very well. Then pull the needle all the way through the cloth. The thread practically ties a knot, and that's the buttonhole stitch. Next to it, the same thing is done. The needle goes through the hole and pokes through the cloth quite close to the raw edge. Leave it there. Take the thread from the eye of the needle and wrap it over the point of the needle before pulling it through. Really, for more detail, I suggest looking into my other video on sewing buttonholes, especially considering I'm not taking my time doing this hole. Like always, I want the stitches to be evenly placed and the same width to create an even buttonhole. And something that seems to happen a lot to me is the thread pulling through unevenly. I've tried a few things to prevent it, but to solve the problem, the first step is to not pull the stitch taut when a massive thread barrels to the raw edge trying to create a knot. The best I can do is just make sure the knot isn't tight before pulling it loose to attempt and separate the different threads or different strands. From here, I might drop the needle and try to pull a single thread through the hole on the top side of the cloth where the needle just came from to find which one wasn't properly pulled through. Usually one is fixed and the other is less tight. Pull the less tight one through to match the fixed one, retake the needle and pull to make the thread through the eye even again and pull the knot taut. At the top of the hole, the last stitch should be at the very top of the raw edge. From here, we send the needle underneath as though we were doing another stitch, except I don't wrap the tailing thread over it, I just pull it through. From here, I stick the needle into the other side of the cloth, about the width of the stitches on that side, level with the thread, and sew through the cloth coming up again through the same hole. Pull this bar tight and then give the cloth a small pull from either side to relax the cloth and the bar so that it's not pulling the cloth together. Then wrapping the bar in thread. Realistically, the bar only needs to be wrapped twice. Pull the thread from a very shallow angle away from where it started. Pulling tightly very effectively covers the bar. Send the needle through the second side of the bar again and take the needle through the buttonhole to the top. From here, I can turn the cloth around to sew the other raw edge of the hole. As something of an aside, it's possible to do a round end to the buttonhole rather than a square bar-typed end. Not like a keyhole, but more like a lapel hole. Personally, I disagree with this method on shirts, because on a placket they should be symmetrical on the top and the bottom, generally, as well as the top of the hole will be under stress from the button. Therefore, I want that side to be tacked so that the cloth is least likely to tear. Each method and type has its place, but in my opinion, shirts should have their buttonholes tacked on both sides. I think that another part of the reason I might be making better hand-sewn shirt buttonholes is the density of stitching. My stitches are usually almost touching, whereas others I've seen have a gap bigger than even the width of the stitch between each stitch. I usually take about 10 to 15 minutes to sew a normal sized hole, but I bet a less dense holes can take as little as 5 or so minutes. And compounding that to 12 to 16 holes in a shirt, that becomes a rather large difference. It's up to you, and again, there's no real reason to hand sew shirt buttonholes if you can machine them nicely. I should also mention that shirt canvas or interfacing can make this easier to a point. If the stiffener is too thick and tough, then it gets difficult, but giving the buttonholes some body can make it easier. At this point I find them as easy as each other, but starting off the stiffening made it much easier. The knots in general shouldn't be very tight. It's more like the following knot holds the previous one in place, but that also doesn't mean that they are loose. Yeah, it can really get confusing when you start talking about tension. Essentially, as long as the thread isn't crimping the cloth, then that should be good, and so long as the thread isn't loose as well. Yeah, like I said, it's quite complicated to describe. The last stitch should be level with the first, which is the same as the very end of the raw edge. This time, pulling the stitch taut, I am sticking the needle through the knot of the first buttonhole stitch that I did. A method borrowed from Korean tailoring, I think, pulling it tight so that the two stitches are kissing. Going back underneath the cloth through the hole just next to the last stitch and pulling it through, creating a similar bar tack as the top of the hole. I say only create one bar because otherwise it quickly becomes bulky. I really want my shirt buttonholes to be very sleek. Wrapping the bar the same as earlier, as well as sending the needle through the second side of the bar and flipping the cloth over. I am stitching through the underside of the bar, creating a small loop, pulling it tight and then doing another loop, this time sending the needle through it and pulling it tight for one last knot. On the other side of the hole, I am sticking the needle into the cloth between the two layers. I want to make a prick stitch away from the hole again, just like I started, but backwards. Trimming the excess tail and the knot, the buttonhole is finished.